right. So we are live. We've got the one and only Mark Alayev, CEO of Thread. I almost said the old word, but it's Thread. Welcome.
It's no longer ChatGenie. Thank you, Kevin. How are you?
Yeah, I'm recovering. I'm recovering from our long and eventful week down in Orlando at IT Nation. I think I caught a bug on the way back and knocked me off my feet yesterday, but I'm back in action, ready to go. How about you? How are you?
Feeling amazing. I think everyone caught a bug leaving such warm climates with so many awesome people. So, but I'm feeling good today as well.
Yeah, that was what an event. I mean, I think they said something like 4,700 people showed up at IT Nation. Yeah.
It was the biggest event that I've ever been to. I think I've been to 5 physical events consecutively, and this is definitely the biggest.
Yeah, the first day it didn't feel like it, but then actually the keynote was packed, and then the rap battle was packed as well. So I don't know if you watched any of the rap battle, but yeah,
I tried.
Yeah, I tried as well as being polite. But anyway, nevertheless, we'll move on for that. But it was a great event. I mean, there was a lot of action, a lot of activity, and the such. But we're not here to talk about IT Nation. We're here to talk about you. So welcome. So what we try to do is shed some humanity, shed some light on kind of the founder journey, the background, the origin story, where you've come from, and try to share that with the audience. And with that, we'll jump right in. We're going to go way back. And so why don't we start with
far back?
Yeah, we'll go far back. So where you're from, and let's talk about your formative years. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah. So I'm from Tajikistan, which is a former Soviet Union republic. When it broke down, we flew out to Queens, New York. I think it was a massive migration as soon as the Iron Curtain was lifted. Wow. About 200,000 people flew out to Queens, New York. I was there for a little while, I think around till I was 10. And then I went to a different ethnic neighborhood, which was in Brooklyn, New York. And so I think I learned a lot of IT back then, because in Brooklyn, you were either unlocking an iPhone or you were building a computer from scratch from Newegg. So I got a lot of hands-on experience doing both, all legal, and went to Brooklyn Technical High School. So that was definitely the formative years, and interacting with a lot of tinkerers, especially in Brooklyn Tech, where it was a lot of folks that were interested in everything from how do you build a computer science program to how do I build a really cool computer to play video games on.
Were there kids in the neighborhood that you knew that turned you on to this? I mean, how did you get ingrained or engrossed in that community, in the tech community at that age?
Yeah. I'm trying to cross a line of what was acceptable back then. So when I think the iPhone 3G came out, I worked at Subway making sandwiches, and when the iPhone 3G came out, I had a few friends working at AT&T, and it was the first time they were offering like subsidized iPhones and stuff. And so where I first got involved was like, hey, like everyone likes these iPhones. I can unlock them. I can resell them. I could put this like custom app store. It was before the app store was like Cynthia or something like that, where we were modding these iPhones and selling them. And so I think that was like the first time where a few of my colleagues from work, a few of my folks from high school were like all about the iPhones. And so we really started to do that, I think, as our first business venture. But then I very, very quickly got a job at RFA, Richard Fleischman Associates, which is an MSP based out of New York. I knew nothing, and they're an MSP focused on financial services. So I was on my Palm Trio Googling what is a hedge fund in the interview room. But I got an internship there, And I think that's kind of what bridged it. I saw people buying technology, I saw people wanting technology, and I got this awesome opportunity to try to sell and integrate technology.
I feel like there's a deeper story behind this whole Brooklyn hustle story. Maybe we'll say that for a part two, what have you. But all right, so you said kind of formative years growing up, Subway, and then it was RFA. I mean, what I guess there's an interest in technology, but I guess when you got that job at the MSP, take me back to like day one. What were you thinking? Day one. Did you make the right decision? Were you just intrigued? Was this fascinating? Was it overwhelming?
So, I mean, I was in high school and I was the first one with like a corporate job, right? So, like, I had to wear pants to work because, it was on 19th floor of 42nd and Madison Avenue. And it was amazing because a lot of the guys there were also tinkerers, people that really love technology. And so it felt right immediately. I also felt maybe for the first time in a while at that point as the dumbest person in the room, which probably was the best thing I could have done for myself. And I think a lot of folks that work at MSPs feel that way. Like the rate of learning at an MSP is far greater than working at an internal IT shop or working DevOps for a startup or something like that. And I felt that immediately. So it was super cool to be the only person in a dress shirt and pants going to high school and then doing the night shift at an MSP.
Wow. Were there early mentors there, or early, I guess bosses that invested in you, or there may be ones that didn't? I mean, take me through that experience, kind of that first job, especially being in high school at the time.
Yeah. I'll definitely give a shout out, which will be a plus and a minus for this gentleman, Miguel Garrido. So he sat to the right of me, and I didn't know the answers to anything, right? Like I wasn't certified. It wasn't that big of a practice. God, how many years ago that was. And so every time I turn around to him, like, oh, how do you solve that? He's like, Google it 3 times before you come back to me. And so that practice of learning how to talk to Google has helped me out so much in life. Understanding that knowledge is accessible, at least in our age, thank God, through self-serve, right? That if you ask the right questions, you shall receive the right answers. It's about knowing how to ask those questions. So that was awesome. And he went on to become a CTO of like a large hedge fund, et cetera. Very, very bright gentleman. And then after that, the director of operations, when I was in a junior sysadmin, I had my first startup idea. I tried to pitch them. So they had their PSA. They've been around from 1989, so around the same time as ConnectWise. They had their own time tracking tool, ticketing tool, all of that. And I was pitching them my RFA, like this customer centric version. And I feel like a broken record 14 years later. So they didn't, they weren't ready for it. And when I had an idea for my consumer startup, Michael Alayev helped to push me through, and he's like, "Look, you got to jump in it. Like you're young, you've done some good work here." It was 3 years into it, I think. And so he did me a favor. Like, I think it's time for you to move on. Wow. And so that's how I jumped into startup world.
Wow. So that's pretty courageous, right? So again, first job, high school, learning a lot, and then you got this, get this idea for startup. And does that run in the family? Is there entrepreneurship in the family, or was that learned with your time between, I guess, Brooklyn and the Bronx?
It was Brooklyn and Queens.
Queens.
Although I think same morals, same hustle.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably familial, especially because the startup that I had was an online food startup called Aptitude. And I was in a line of people that had restaurants. So they had restaurant startups. So I guess I had a virtual restaurant. Yeah, I guess it's a bug that's passed down genetically.
Yeah. And how did that first startup go? How did the online? Yeah. online virtual food app go?
Well, everything's relative. We started at the same time that DoorDash, Caviar started, so they did better. Um, we did better than the folks that didn't start a startup. So we got integrated ultimately into delivery.com. And I think this is something that I lean into heavily into where I am now. So I worked at delivery.com after getting kind of rolled into it with some of our key folks. And we had a Hong Kong business. We had a US business. It was fairly large when I was there, about $40 million a year, but it was fully consumer driven. So it was all about like, how do I make this easier for people? So we integrated into things like Facebook, Google, Yelp. We had mobile apps. We had a responsive web app. And I learned a lot about what end users wanted.
Mm.
And I feel like as we get further in the story, I'm very consumer focused.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I wasn't able to move the food to MSP, although who knows, maybe that's, collaborative food ordering platform for MSPs is next, but I was able to move the consumer orientation to MSPs, I think.
Yeah. What were some of the, I guess, the biggest lessons learned, or were there any, you look at those, the first entrepreneurial pursuits, and, it sounds like you had a relatively successful outcome, but any disappointments or on the other end of the spectrum, anything that you were just ridiculously proud of for that first startup of yours?
I learned something so massive. That whatever you set out to pursue will not be what you end up winning with. And the only answer is to dedicate the time. So we ended up getting into a bad situation where our investor, who wasn't a VC, it was a strategic investor, a merchant processing company, ended up going bankrupt. And so we ended up quitting. And retrospectively, I was like, why would I do that? I just spent so much money actually building a platform. This was like before Stripe marketplace payments. It was so raw, so young, and it was working. We got some dishes trending. And my biggest disappointment is that I quit. And I realized that people quit because they set financial goals or financial barriers. Like, hey, if I don't have money to do this, I'll quit. But I think it should be time driven. Any entrepreneurial effort that you have should be like, hey, I have 5 years to get to the first milestone. And then if I do hit that milestone, I'll renew for another 5 years. You're not investing your money necessarily. What you're investing into is your time. And so I took a completely different approach with ChatGenie / now Thread, which is like, what are the units of time that I'm investing into a venture? And I will continue to do it at any cost because I commit time, not money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a big, big lesson learned for me. As a founder, that's your biggest resource. It's time.
Yeah. Well said. So, moving into, this next chapter, right, into ChatGenie now Thread. What's the origin story where you just, you had this last venture and then you got the bug again? So how did you, what's the run up to starting this one?
Yeah. So I was working at delivery.com. Life was pretty basic, as anyone that has worked outside of the MSP world knows. And then, that director that pushed me out, Michael Asher, pushed me forward. That's a better way of saying it. Mm-hmm. Was like, hey, look, I think we need to innovate. So we want to innovate. What can we do? And I said, well, I don't know. But all I know is if we dedicate the time to it, we'll probably figure it out. And so I rejoined as director of service delivery. I took over the NOC, the automation team, which was like the maintenance team, and a few other teams. And there, it was like, okay, well, let's get the MSP working better. Great. And at the same time, let's keep an eye out on like, what can we really do? Are there any benefits? And at that time, I rolled out Slack to RFA. God, that was great because they were on MS Communicator, which I believe like the last production release was in 2008.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yeah.
I joined, I'm pretty sure in like 2016.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2016, 2017. And so when we got that, it like blew up the internal communication. Like everyone was like, wait, we're like, we can all talk. We can all like work together. It was awesome. And then the first problems that happened was, but none of this is getting back to the ticket. None of this is getting back. Like the collaboration software had so much gravity that the time of the organization was being spent there versus the ERP, whatever the business normalization side of it was. And so that was our first insight. I think we were like, hey, I bet you we're not the only ones to feel this. Like, we just want to collaborate with people. Like, hey, what's this issue? Okay, data integrity didn't work. Backups failed. Disaster recovery failed. Service desk got a P1 issue and slept on it too long, but it's actually like an Exchange 2010 outage. And so our first insight was like, how do we get this back into the ticketing system? And that's why it was Chat Genie, because it was a genie that was synchronizing chat with your ticketing system, essentially. That was the first insight.
And so from the moment you're like, you had that realization, what was the process to starting or creating the technology and starting the business?
So this is why I love MSPs, because I think we all have a common trait. The first step to starting a business is completely underestimating the amount of work it takes.
Yep.
Because if you actually accurately, I mean, Kevin, if you actually, in your last venture, would have accurately estimated how much time, effort, blood, sweat it would have taken, would any normal human being have taken it? There's no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. And so I think like that passion and really bad estimates, we're like, okay, let's build a version of this and let's make it free. So we went to IT, and IT Nation will be a big part of this journey, because the first IT Nation we went to was like, okay, let's talk about what we felt. Do other people feel what we feel? Looks like they do. Second IT Nation, okay, we released Slack to ConnectWise. All right, that's great. Now Microsoft 365 copied Slack, and Teams is a big buzzword. Great, let's release ConnectWise to Slack and Teams. And we did it, completely free for years. Just, Matt and I, the other co-founder who sat across the desk from me at RFA. He's the ops guy. I'm the tech guy. And we just like, let's release something and hear people's struggles. And we've been very fortunate to have been making the right hypotheses, I guess, like the right predictions of pain points. And so that's where it really started.
It's interesting because a lot of companies, it goes back to your point of a lot of companies underestimate how much time. It's always, take the time and double it, if not triple it. But you took that slow path, right? Where most companies are revenue, listen to the customer, revenue, listen to the customer. And you guys identified a problem, and it's a real life problem that every MSP has struggled with, and took the time. You kind of slow rolled the build, getting the feedback, iterating, and then going to market. And that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And I don't want to downplay how fortunate of an opportunity that I've had to be able to do that. Like, I don't think that's always the case, right? Like, there are bills to pay, there are developers to pay. I think we were very fortunate in that we were able to do that. But I think almost everyone should strive to find customers before they find the business model. Because if you find customers, if you find people that are willing to give you feedback, that's a form of payment. They're paying you in time, right? And like, that's a big concept of mine. Even if you look now at how I build a product, time is a big dimension. Time is a currency. And so, like, appreciating that people giving you time to give you feedback is payment. And so accept time as an early form of currency, and then being able to upscale that into financial currency, right? In more solidified measures of dollars or, pounds, whatever it is. So absolutely, that was a very instrumental way of getting started.
Awesome. So when did you guys end up going to market? Say, look, we've aggregated enough feedback. We've got something here. We're solving problems. When did you guys say, here, now it's time to go out, and put up the shingle, package, pricing, all that stuff. Take me through that process, that decision making process, because you're still working at the MSP at the same time, right?
Yeah. Until this year, until May of this year.
Mm.
So that happened a lot earlier. About, I would say, not 2021, maybe end of 2020. So what we saw, we launched the second version of our product based on a lot of feedback. And it was very nuanced. Like, we made a lot of assumptions that were too far-fetched. And luckily, because we had that group of people that like believed in us, they corrected our course. They're like, hey, that's not as valuable to me. And one of the hardest things that I've ever dropped was like the status flow product feature that I had, which was really expensive. And I thought, like, this is the future. Not letting people choose statuses from a drop down, but like giving them forks, like this status to that status. And like, to my huge surprise, they were just like, no, throw it all out. I don't care. And so we launched the second version of the product. And at that point, I was like, hey, I think at this point we need to get different type of feedback. And money is a different type of feedback than time. It's economic value. Like, am I actually impacting your business? Because a lot of MSPs are entrepreneurs, and we play with our time. Whenever we find something that's interesting, we like spend time on it, or like it like drives the passion out of us, whether it brings economic value or not. Which is why we have so many peer groups that like, hey, look, focus your time on the things that bring you money. And so I was like, okay, we gotta give it a go. We have to understand what our economic value was. And our very first client was Mike Hopkins from DevSource at $19 a month. And I was like, yes, we're valued at $19 a month. And I'll tell you down the line, that does not make for a good business. But it was good to understand where we were.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had, some tremendous support along the way, right? You're still, at your day job up until, May of this year, 2022. And, I've seen recently that you've got, you've announced, or it might have been announced previously, but you have some pretty big backers behind you, right? Some
just announced this last week.
Yeah, there you go. So I guess, early on, I guess obviously bootstrapped and trying to get to this point. And then, I'm assuming that's the case. And then tell me about the group that is now investing in you guys.
Yeah. I love the group that we're with. The funny thing that I think you only hear in America is that there's a cost to money. Right? Like, there's different costs to money. There's cheap money, there's expensive money. It's definitely an American concept or a more mature economic concept. So when we set out, we really wanted to get people that understood the industry. We wanted strategic partners. And so my son was born in September of last year. And I think we got on the first VC call with Integrated Capital 2 days later. I was still in the hospital. So I think it was the first call that JR from Integrated has ever taken from a founder in the hospital. So our partners today are Integrated Capital, who've invested, widely in many spheres, but the one that we know is Lion Guard.
Mhm.
I was luckily introduced to them by Joe from Lion Guard, who's just an incredible human being.
Mhm.
And then the other major component of the investment is David Bellini and Adam Slutskin, who have their own investment group that has continued to reinvest in the industry. And we wanted to make sure that some of the MSPs that we work with share the upside. So we had 5 really close partners that we wanted to make sure get some equity at a great valuation. So we went all MSP. Like we could have, like, we're a Twilio startup. We got it. We spoke with a lot of different VCs, and we could have pushed that front. It just felt like at this early stage, they don't have the models to truly understand what does it mean to be an MSP. And I think everyone downplays what it means to be an MSP until they're an MSP, and they're like, oh, so like all of the enterprise software you're selling doesn't support a channel program, and you have to manually reconcile everything, and you need multi-tenancy. So for me, that was very important early on. So I really wanted to stay within the MSP investment ecosystem.
It's great. Yeah, you're so right in that. I was just having a call earlier today with an investment group and explaining to them that, there's, go back 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, there were some boutique investment groups that kind of understood channel and maybe MSP. This is pre all the craze of rolling up MSPs. Most of the VCs, most of the private equity VCs, they're so focused on enterprise, maybe down to the upper ends of mid market, and it's only been the last 5 or 6, 7 years that they've come into the channel and understood the value and really the complexities of the channel, right? And I was telling this particular VC that think about this is it's been a ridiculously untapped marketplace, and you think about the value that the MSP represents. Not just the value of what they do, but they're often 2-year, 3-year, 4-year deals with their customers. And I think there's been like this big awakening, great awakening of investing in these types of solutions. And so you're seeing a lot of bigger companies, PEs come into the space and start to bolt on, try to jump on. And so, but it's great you found groups, and certainly Mr. Bellini there and Mr. Slutskin are professionals when it comes to this space, and probably certainly
you have to hear the story. I have to blow up Mr. Slutskin's position, Adams. So it was an IT Nation where we were like in the midst of a funding round. It's 2021, or trying to raise this funding round, and he's like, "Okay, I want to hear you sell." Obviously, CROs will be CROs. Given that he was CRO of Lion Guard, for anyone who doesn't know, and the CRO of ConnectWise, he's like, okay, I'm going to choose a random MSP. You have to pitch them. And so he just chooses a random MSP. This is like after the booth, after everything, where like by the bar, the famous bar. And that company ended up being Ergos, who is now one of the investors. With Salim at the CEO, and Salim wasn't there, but it was incredible because he, like, when you understand the MSP industry, you understand exactly what are the pain points.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was watching us like negotiate, like, what are your pain points? What are your, like, going back and forth. And I think like that context is super crucial to being able to mine for a really great early investment. So, if I say anything, I think if you're trying to do anything in the MSP space, you should, as a seed founder, probably it becomes broader and broader as your seed round or your rounds get bigger and bigger. But as a seed founder, you probably want to find people that understand the intricacies.
Yeah.
And so you'll feel like you have a more fair valuation and the right support. It's not dumb money, to my point of like, what is the cost of money?
Sure.
This is strategic money.
Yeah. No, well said. Well said. So take me forward in the future. Take me 3 to 5 years in the future. What does Thread look like?
Well, it's definitely threaded. I don't know. We'll have to change it to fabric or something to represent something bigger. Probably
Right.
not. I feel like there's a cycle, and as MSPs, we should know this. There's a cycle to software. We know this because we sold them firewalls, and then we sold them next-gen firewalls. We sold them antivirus, and then we sold them next-gen antivirus. Right? We understand that there's a cycle or a life cycle to software. What feels like is happening to me is that there's a cycle going on now, where RMM is being, enlightened or changing into configuration management, perhaps Intune. I think Enable is doing a great job, Ninja, of understanding that. And then you have this huge explosion of automation tools, the RPA tools, the Roost, the PIAs, and RPA is very hard to get your head around. And so I love Roost Vision, right? Like with the Robotic Operations Center, I was doing that for financial services companies. So I would say there's 3 layers to the future: conversational, configurational, and automational. I have not Googled if automational is a word, but if it's not, I'm adding it to the Urban Dictionary. Conversational is about the layer that's between the person asking for help and the person trying to deliver, or person or AI trying to deliver that help. And it's all about understanding the intent of the conversation. Like, are you asking for something new? Are you asking for something existing? Are you having an outage? Is it affecting an office or a company? Is it affecting an individual? Conversational is about bringing real and rich conversation to the forefront. Like you said, the MSP industry lags, right? Which is right, because we're a B2B software, we're not B2C. What you'll see Apple launching or Facebook launching will come to the B2B sector years later. So I think that's the first frontier. Can we normalize and understand the intent of the request coming in? Then I think it's configurational. It's understanding, well, what is the configuration of the individual, of the device, of the company, of the site, being able to store that, right? And perhaps being able to modify the configuration that matches the requirements of the company's policy. And then it's automational. Okay, great. So we know what the person wants. I'd like to get my password reset. We understand where their password is being stored or their identity is being stored, which is hopefully in a cloud-based software, but it could be Azure, it could be AD on-prem. And then the automational component is like, okay, well, great. What script can we run in order to help fix that issue? Like, this person with this issue, with this configuration, needs this script. And that's what's going to fix the problem. If you're looking for end-to-end, it has to be conversational, configurational, and automational. That's the new stack. It has to understand what you're looking for, where you're looking for it, and then how to fix it. And so with Thread, that's why we love the name. We're conversational threading. We're just focusing on the conversational piece. And I think we're the only ones to do it in a meaningful way. I think there are people that are doing it, but we're the only people that are like, hey, we're just going to focus on understanding and reaching out to the customer. That's our goal.
Yeah,
and we'll
awesome.
give you all the information you need.
Yeah, I love where you guys are going. I mean, it's just, I think you're spot on with kind of the life cycle of technologies, and then, what's next, and that level of automation is going to be paramount moving forward. So with that, I try to end on a question that's more, maybe recommendations or thoughts, things that, the MSP that's listening or watching this, what should they be focusing on? Could be professionally, personally, as just the whole world evolves over the next couple of years. What's one thing they should be focused or working on in their business?
I think a lot of it as an entrepreneur, like the thread between us as a software company for MSPs and MSPs themselves, I think is the entrepreneur. And I think the hardest thing to understand as an entrepreneur is value. You need to value yourself and you need to value your company's time. And so when I say value yourself, I mean, it's hard to delegate. It's really hard to give away control. But the only way you can work on the company versus in the company is by finding great people and trusting them. Take a leap. It's okay if they may make mistakes. Hey, it's okay. You don't know yet. Let's optimize on that. So value your time and understand that working on the business is just as important as working in the business. And then on the company level, value your business. Don't charge T&M. Don't charge $80 a seat a month. Charge the 300. Charge the 200. Value your business. Your unit of economics will get better. You'll be able to provide them with a better service. They'll like it more and they'll feel justified. But if you ever waver in your value, that will be felt throughout the whole buyer's journey. If you feel like you're worth $80, the other person will feel like you're worth $80. If you feel like you're worth 300, you'll act like you're worth 300 and they'll feel like you're worth 300. So I think it's all about like value yourself, value your company, and your employees will value you. They'll feel valued. Like the whole unit of economics will shift the right way. And it took me such a long time to learn that, right? I started as director of service delivery, moved into chief data officer. And like understanding that value proposition was really hard because you want to do the work for free. Like I said, we're so passionate that our time is almost free. Like, yeah, I'll help you. Let's talk about how to update your QuickBooks into Dropbox instead of saying, hey, QuickBooks doesn't back up into Dropbox. Like, move to QuickBooks Online, right? Like, I think that value proposition is super important as an entrepreneur of an MSP, or if you're in any manager, director, C-level position of a larger MSP, you're constantly trying to articulate value and protect the value of your company and your team.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny, I ask that question of every guest, and more often than not, I get more of a technical response relating to their specific technology. And what I appreciate is that it's practical insight, and it's reinforcing, I think, a lot of what, not just MSPs, but any business owner, thinks, but they have a hard time putting in practice. And so I appreciate you reinforcing that, because I know a lot of business owners, a lot of, just executives struggle.
It's scary.
Yeah,
it's scary. Dynamic. What if I lose this deal?
Yeah.
Then that's a deal not worth having.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because it'll have 5 more where the economics work out better. It's scary, and it's not something that like is black and white. Like for anyone listening, I don't think it's like I've made this decision, this is who I am. It's an everyday practice. Like every day, you trade time for value, and you just got to choose it choose it in a way where you can offer better value for your customers. But yeah, I'm trying to be less technical, even though my junior sysadmin brain wants to go to never fail and all the disaster recovery tools. But from a business perspective, this is really important to me.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, and I know myself and everyone else, again, watching, listening, has gotten value out of your time. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll wrap up this episode. But Mark, I want to thank you again. The insight, and it's been a treat watching you guys, especially over the last couple of months, just with the rebrand and the velocity you guys have. It's really great to see. So So well done.
Thank you, Kevin. As long as we're adding value, we're in the right path.
Amen. All right. On that note, thanks everybody.
Thanks.